Good evening and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got a special guest here to talk with me, Joe Blamey.
Good
Um,
evening.
Joe, you are a writer.
I am a content writer. I write marketing copy for various websites and various products and that kind of stuff. So we're churning out a lot of content, long form, also social media, SEO and that kind of thing. But in my free time, I like to keep the creative juices flowing and write creatively at home.
Cool. We were talking the other day at ye olde watering hole, as one does. And one of the things we kind of been thinking about is just kind of how writing is produced. It's quite a buzz topic on the internet, but it is something that's quite important. I mean, I managed to have a look. I've been looking at kind of like and asking kind of some friends lately, like who writes, and it's hard enough getting people who read to answer. I think I could probably count on both hands the friends I have that read. The friends I have that write is even smaller minority. So we were looking kind of like not just how to write, but why. Why would we write? Why you write, Joe? I know it's quite a broad kind of questions.
It's for me, I think it's always been a bit of a release. It's been something I've always enjoyed doing, and it's without getting too into it, it's a bit like a meditation form. It's kind of you sit down, you get into your head for 40 minutes or however long you're writing. You go down little alleyways, you go down journeys, you kind of little adventures, I suppose, in your mind, which is always quite fulfilling. And sometimes it's exhausting. Sometimes you finish writing and all you want to do is sleep when your hand hurts and you've got nothing left in you. But I've always found it quite a fulfilling creative exercise, as well as it has paid off in terms of the fact that I can do some form of writing professionally, and if you steer it right, you can have creative elements in it as well. But I think creatively, that's always been quite a key part in my makeup, is to always stay creative, keep those juices flowing, keep it ticking over, and never losing inspiration.
In which case, what would you say kind of your favorite type or genre of writing is?
Well, I think it would have to be, horror in general, because I'm absolutely fascinated with. I'm not talking like hammer horror and that sort of like gore.
Not Saw.
No. I think it's just trying to tap into that human psychological fear, that it's trying to create a fear in someone that's never experienced that. And I think that's to be able to do that and send shivers down my spine as I'm reading it is amazing. I'm in awe of anyone that can do that.
That's a good point. That is a good point. I remember the first time that I read Stephen King's The Shining.
Yes.
Have you read that one?
Yes, yeah, that's terrifying.
It's absolutely terrifying.
That bit where he's it's not even the movie, but the bit where he's in the tunnel.
Oh God!
The there's something in there.
the moving things out.
That
was.
Isn't that's the craziest thing, that you can have someone who wrote that 40 years ago or however long ago still can tap into some very element, and it never really shows you what it is. And I think that is a work of art in my eyes, is that it can make you shift you to an emotion on that level. I think that and horror, I think, is probably the easiest version of that to see it, because I think once you get into one of those things, you're on a roller coaster ride.
Cool. Kind of like the illicit of, what's that word? Not illicit. How do I say that? Of emotion.
Oh,
too illicit emotion, but it's not. That wasn't the way I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, that's the, isn't it? That's the thing with writing, is that you're essentially it's like a form of telepathy, isn't it? I have a thought, and I put that thought into your head through this piece of text, and I think that's always kind of excited me when it comes to writing or reading, and even just gathering news from a newspaper. that has been processed by someone. Someone's gathered the news, processed it, written it out, and then here it is. Take that information on and then pass it on to someone else.
Yeah, that's going back to something you said a minute ago. The whole idea of meditation, writing being a kind of meditation. When I was thinking about, and I was writing the other day, I just started writing about a metaphor about death, which kind of ended up accidentally becoming half of a chapter itself. It wasn't half a chapter, it was more like a paragraph. But I just wanted a little kind of like, I think I was trying to talk about winter and autumn being metaphors of death, of being
the end of something.
And then I was talking about kind of life in the summer. And how kind of death seems to leave it alone. And then I was kind of linked them together, and then kind of thought, well, perhaps like death allows life to live so that it can kill it, because how can it kill what never lives?
It's very profound very quickly.
You're right.
You end up in this bulk hole. How did I end up here? Just question the meaning of life in five sentences.
And it's like, I like these combination of words. I'm just not sure I'm going to incorporate it into what I'm working on right now.
The amount of times I think maybe if you could just gather all those crazy ideas and just put them into a book of thoughts and just like, well, that's that, and figure that one out. Riddle me this.
Bradley lent me a book yesterday. I've got it just over here. Not yesterday, it was a few weeks ago. It's a mutual friend. I don't know if we can see that. It's As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner.
Okay.
Yeah. It's strange that we just touch upon death and just like the metaphoricalness of it. And I think one of the last books that I read was deeply.
I think because that's such a profound thing, isn't it? I think death. I think also, writing and reading similar experiences, or it helps people prepare for that kind of thing. Is they say buy your kids a hamster because when the hamster dies, they have to come to terms with death, and it makes grieving easier for later in life. I think to some people, especially reading and experiencing those higher states of emotions that you can get from a book, I think is another process of adding that to your armor as such. I suppose it's kind of, I've always had that opinion of, if I can try to understand an emotion without having to go through it, at least I'll be able to process those things when it happens.
Yeah, I've often thought quite similar, especially coming out the other side when you have lots of emotions that you can't process. Just to read about them, find out what it is that you're experiencing helps you to deal with it. In fact, it is something that I try to tell students, the school I work at. That could have been phrased badly. The reading and expanding what is essentially your base of emotions really helps you understand and to not be that kind of moody, grumpy teen making all those mistakes.
Sort of go through it, don't you? You can experience it through. You can read Hunter S. Thompson, but at least that means you don't have to go on a 12-day drug binge in the Nevada desert.
Right, this is a book that we wanted to talk about. Actually, or a short story, right? I don't have to read it or anything.
No. I have a foundation degree in journalism. That was kind of where I set off with writing, and I probably completely misunderstood Hunter S. Thompson. He's a gonzo journalist. He's famous for that, and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and all those kind of high octane kind of stories. And I remember reading that whilst I was at university and just thinking, that's it. I need to go and find these stories. And there was a series of trips that I went on trying to find the story. But you kind of never really get it because you're never pushing it as far as this guy. But one of the things, if you haven't encountered Hunter S. Thompson is to just pick up a book of short stories. It's Screwjack. It covers pretty much his style of writing all the way through. And I mean, these enormous font size, and you'll get through it in probably one sitting, but it gives you just a little flavour of what he was all about. It's kind of dark. It's very much from his perspective. It's some of it as well. I mean, I don't think he would get away with what he got away with today. I think he's quite lucky that he existed in that specific period of time. I don't think you could get away with rather a celebrity figure who's constantly off his face on drugs and firing guns and whatever. But he's a very interesting character, and probably quite a big influence on the writing. My style of writing is always very much say it as it is kind of thing, and sort of stick your stake in the ground and say, this is how I see the world, and you're either with it or you're not. And I think that comes from this kind of guy, this kind of attitude. So,
cool. What years were you?
Well, he's probably 60s all the way through to sort of the 70s, 80s, I think even into the 90s. But he died in 2005, so I'm not sure what. But there's loads of things came out. You've got Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail. You've got your Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. You've got Hell's Angels, which is really good. He went and stayed with the Hell's Angels for a long time. I think he used to write for the Rolling Stone as well, like the magazine. So that was kind of his thing. But he ended up with the Hell's Angels being scared of him for some part because he was just too much of a loose wire. And you think that is a story, isn't it? You know what I mean? But I mean that would lead me on to discussing inspiration and that kind of stuff. Is one of the things I've always felt when it comes to trying to make inspiration for writing is to have a bank of experiences to call upon. And obviously, living in the Hell's Angels, that's quite an experience. But even on a smaller scale, you've got to go through experiences to be able to call upon those things. I don't mind going on about that later on if you want, or I can carry on about that now.
Well, now that you brush upon inspiration, I was thinking a little bit earlier today about what kind of. I would never say that I have is the wealth of experience nor the talent as this man. However, one of the things that did kind of like get me into writing and English and reading, we had the same English teacher.
Yes, we did. Yeah, Mr. Bradley.
Yeah, I don't know whether you were like this, but it was very much that man that got me into reading.
Yes.
Got me into questioning the world, to be honest.
I think that's very key, is a good teacher at that age. I think you need to have someone to inspire you to keep reading and to promote that curiosity and that fuel your writing. Because I mean, we used to write loads of short stories and things, didn't we, as classes? And I mean, you think about some of the stuff we must have produced at the time must have been terrible, and God knows what you must have thought reading through them. But the encouragement you get from that gives you enough strength to carry on and keep writing. It's very easy to kill something dead right in the way, and I think to have someone to say, that was good, do better, or how about you try this, and just sort of encourage that, but also in a very, very, very strict way. He was a very strict man.
Oh, God, yes. All he used to do was hit me in the head with books. Even if I was working, he knew I could work harder. That's why I liked him. He had my back.
Yeah. No, he's I'd say an influence. I would say.
Yeah.
A big influence. So, I mean, hats off to any English teachers who have that task, because it's very hard to inspire. I imagine so, especially these days. It's hard to inspire a generation of kids when there's probably a lot more easily accessible stimulation than to say, hey, pick up a book and persevere with it for 400 pages.
It is a lot easier to play a video game. It is a lot easier to text a friend. It's a lot easier. to do all of these things, which makes me wonder how it is that such a generation of kind of base people are going around talking to each other. Surely they must get bored. Like, if they're spending all of their time socializing, they're not spending any of their time learning, then what are they talking about?
Well, that is one of my key concerns is the generation of language, I guess, is kind of a rather pious way of putting it, I guess. But you're seeing a general erosion of the English language, especially in the written form. It's almost like a carefree regard to it, which you would think would make someone who writes for a living, it would make my life a lot easier. But what you end up with is the literacy of your audience, the general literacy of your audience is a lot lower. So when you do put in a nice, a pun or play on words, or you use a bit of grammar to throw the conversation or change things, you're trying to steer the person through a piece. What actually happens is that they don't get it, they don't see it, and you end up with people just not understanding the point you're trying to make.
And as someone who's writing professionally,
trying to sell things, you want people to know that I am being ironic in this conversation, because there's little nuances that you should never assume your literacy of your readership, but little nuances that are playful and get people on. If you know what I'm doing, then you're on board with it, and you're probably going to be more softer towards what I'm trying to put forward. But if you don't understand that in general, I think even I mean, you could be right down to the grammar and talk about there and those and all those people were spelling that, and there's nothing wrong with people having spelling mistakes, because that happens every time. I have spelling mistakes in pieces.
I'm terrible at spelling. Google's my best friend.
There's some stuff that goes to print, and we have 15,000 copies of this thing, and it comes back, and I look, and I'm like, oh no, there's a spelling mistake in the first page. Yeah, it happens. It happens to everyone. It happens to the best of us. But I have taken every possible step to try and capture and stop every chance, and then sometimes they do slip through. But that is what happens. But if you don't have any understanding or care for those things, and then I think that because if you think about it, back in the day, you read some of those love letters that were sent back from the First World War, that was coming from your average bloke who probably had barely an education, who was on the front lines in probably the most stressful situations, writing letters back with no other audience in mind other than the person he was writing to. And some of those things are the most poetic and beautiful things you could ever read. And I don't think you're going to have that level today. I don't think the text messages the kids are sending each other these days are even an ounce of that kind of beauty to it.
I suppose it's so effortless.
But that's the thing, and it's almost like it doesn't mean anything. You can send a text message and it's gone. It's a letter. I mean, I haven't received a handwritten letter in years.
I haven't.
But when you do, it's like, wow, right? Even when you get a letter from the bank.
I can't recall the last time I was sent a handwritten letter. If I was sent a handwritten love letter, I would keep that for an eternity.
Yeah, exactly.
I would.
That's the thing. They are incredibly beautiful, aren't they? And it's I don't know whether you would get those kind of things. Even like John Keats and that kind of stuff. Okay, the guy was a poet, but his love letters to Fanny Braun was just so deeply profound and kind of bittersweet that there are anthologies made up of these things, and I don't think in 100 years you're going to have like the text message anthology of.
Well, we wonder, like, kind of the legacy our generation is leaving behind, if it's leaving anything.
Well, I mean, that is that concern, isn't it? Because a lot of work is now going to be digital. If humans were to be erased tomorrow, and then archaeologists in a million years dig up stuff, there's no evidence that we ever why did he go
well,
to
if
this
it all goes
box
down. I mean, the technology's not been there for very long. It might not be there for very much longer. We don't know these things.
No.
You were just saying about oh Lord, what did you just say? It brushed upon something we were talking about earlier. Oh God, it's gone from me. No, that was it. The whole idea of writing something directly onto computer uh, is only a Sith deals in absolutes is killing creativity.
Yeah. So, well,
your method, Joe. Your
my
method,
method.
Joe.
What happens is a lot of the time is if you have to turn around, copy quick, or if say you've got to write something important, so you have to write a letter to someone, or so it's just say you want to write something and you don't really know where to begin, or you have an idea, maybe you have a structure of a few points, but you're not really sure where you need to be heading. And this goes for everything I do at work. I write longhand first because you find that your mind, when you're writing longhand, works behind the speed. You can only write slower than you can think. Whereas when you're typing, you're thinking pretty much at the same speed as you can type. And so your brain just keeps hitting this buffer as you go through. Whereas when you're writing longhand, your brain is going ahead and you're able to almost have a constant stream of copy coming through, which is a lot easier, keeps the flow, keeps you developing points a lot easier. It keeps it moving in a direction. Whereas when you type directly to a word processor, you're editing as you go, you're thinking at the same speed as you're typing, you're coming up with these little red and green lines, and you go back and you change that and you think, oh, that's not great, I should move that there. And before you know, you spend 100, you've got 100 words in an hour and you've got nothing to show for it. So the process is I write on paper with a pen, long form, just keep going. Don't care how it started, don't worry about where it's going, just let it take you in any direction, because this is a complete freeform draft. Then once you get to the end of it, or you kind of get the gist of it and you know where you're going, stand it up, type it, and then as you go through it, you'll find yourself naturally tweaking things, putting a full stop there. You think, that sentence is way too long, let's cut that there, let's new paragraph, let's develop this idea a little bit more. You can edit things on the screen. You end up with pretty much you're there. You should be there at that point. Print it off, get a pen, go through it, read it again, and edit. And you'll probably find that you might want to move that paragraph up a bit, cut that bit. You might realize you never actually answered the question that you were trying to do in the first place, so you have to put that in there. And I think that comes from the principle that your brain can only process something sort of twice before it starts to just not see the mistakes. If you type something directly to the screen and then read through it, chances are if you read through it again, you're not going to spot that mistake, because your brain just fills in the gaps. You find like you missed a word or something, but your brain is it knows what it should be saying.
Just because as a person, you know what you mean.
Yeah.
And even if you structure it to a way that makes sense to you, it doesn't mean that you've structured it to a point that's even grammatically correct.
Yeah.
Let alone that will make sense to anybody else.
And sometimes, as harsh as it is, you kind of get caught up in your own genius and you think you're really making some superb point, but really you've lost everyone, and you've somehow drawn a comparison between the moon and I don't know, a moth or something.
Yeah.
And it's just too abstract. And I think for the general reader, because that's another thing, is just hand it to someone, get someone to read it, anyone, and so can you follow what I'm saying? and people most of the time will be honest with you. I think some people won't want to hurt your feelings, but it's best to catch their opinion on it, so at least you can make up your excuses before you put it out to the world.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This is something, we were talking about this before, and we both said we both got a 3-step program. Joe's reasoning for it is a lot better than mine. Mine is that I simply do not trust myself. But I will do a longhand written version before anything else. I find myself these days carrying a notebook with me more and more because you find yourself you be at work, you could be playing cricket at the gym, but not at the gym, I'm too pumped up. But you find yourself in different situations whereby you just get 20 minutes, and 20 minutes could be 300 words, and that could be your word count for the day if it's a good 300 words.
One of my favorite things to do, especially if I'm having a slow day and my brain just isn't engaging. Maybe I'm doing admin stuff at work and I just haven't had a chance to sort of exercise it. What I like to do is just come up with the craziest scenario and write from that. Pick a newspaper, take two completely unrelated stories, two elements of that, mash them together and just see where that goes. And Mr. Blobby holds up a bank, and just see where that goes and have fun with it. Like, how did he get there? What did he do? How does he even hold the gun? Like, why is he there? Just run with those crazy concepts, and before you know it, you've written something that's funny. It's bizarre, and you've got the cogs turning, and you find that it's a lot easier just to sort of sit down. You need to have a way of stepping away from the mundane, otherwise you will write the mundane. If you can push yourself away from that conventional way of thinking when you need to, and having little exercises like that, I think that's it's fun as well. It just makes writing fun.
I like it. I might use it myself actually. Everything I write comes out so dark that I think that might be a good cue.
This what's that thing, like two rights won't make a wrong, but 70 wrongs make a weird, and it's like if you just take 70 of the wrong elements and put them together, you've got something amazing that's just completely off the shelf. And that's the fun of writing, isn't it? Because it's, why not? I think it was even Stephen King that says a lot of his books, a lot of his ideas come from a scenario. He picks a scenario, a haunted house shuts down over winter, or time travel back to when Kennedy was killed, and things just you can boil a lot of those stories down, even really a lot of other books, you can boil them down to just one key scenario. What if this happens? What if time travel is a thing? And I think all it takes is just one little spark. So maybe from that Mr. Blobby holding up a bank idea, maybe actually you think, well, I don't know what. Maybe that there is a kids' TV show on the run, sort of thing, or the mass Blobby murder, or you can go up with this crazy scenario, and then you've got something scary going on. You've got all this imagine Zippy and Bunkle showing up under your bed.
You're going to inspire crimes, man.
It's just run with those ideas. Take that scenario. What would happen if the moon fell out of the sky? And if you can don't get bogged down in the science of it. I think that's what kills especially a lot of ideas I've started. I've got millions of unfinished ideas. You just get bogged down in it. If you think about it, I don't know how my phone works. I know it works. I know that I can connect to the internet and phone people, but I don't know how it connects to satellites, and I don't know how the internet really works. I have a concept of it. So you think about it, if you can write a character that is just experiencing that thing in that moment, it doesn't matter how the scientific elements of it, like time travel. I mean, how are you ever going to explain time travel? You know what I mean? If you could explain time travel, you invented it. So you don't have to get bogged down in the nitty gritty. You just get the story going. Don't bore us. Get to the chorus. Get going. Get the ideas moving out on, and just try and just have fun with the concept, and don't try to get too technical. If you don't know, you don't know, and the chances are nobody else will know anyway. Unless you're an astrophysicist, and but you've probably written the wrong book. That's the case, You think of Philip K. Dick. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? There are whole elements of that book where it's so futuristic. Nobody's explained, is it?
Like the sensory modulators.
Yes, and all of those things, and that doesn't. He never even touches on how that gets.
No, we're just looking at the effects.
Yeah,
and its
People
effects
do.
on the characters and the effects of the humanity of the characters, especially in that book. That was the overriding theme of that one.
And that's why it's so influential, is because it's quite a short book, and he could have made it thousands of pages long, but he could go back in the backstory of the war and what happened and how things are split up, and that would be fascinating. That would be really interesting.
I would love to read what Philip K. Dick said about, was it Tanahir Gates?
Yeah,
I would love to. I want to see that. In fact, I'd be happy with the movie. That'll do. Anything, a picture, but a picture crudely drawn by a child.
Isn't that amazing that you can sit there and you could try and figure it out for yourself, and that's and I think that's he just hands you the idea. And it's what you do with it is kind of how that goes.
Yeah, Ubik had a similar kind of but what I like about him, because I don't know if he got me into philosophy, but it's the philosophical ideas that he kind of brings about. It's like Ubik. We've got the whole brain in a vat scenario. We've got the Chinese room. You can't leave a pause on that. We've got the whole Chinese room, what it is to understand language and the difference between the semantics and syntax of language, and what it is for a computer to understand language.
You really get into those.
It really got me into all of that.
The thing is, that's taking the philosophical idea or something and not worrying about the scientific gumph that goes with it.
Yeah, of course.
I probably should know more about how my car works, but I know that it works. And that's
enough.
The element.
Yeah. I know that I do get paid. I don't know how I get paid or what.
Money moves from somewhere.
Yeah, just money appears in my bank account. I go to work. Between that, no idea.
Exactly. I think and if you do somehow get to a level where it is published, I'm sure that there'll be a team of researchers more than willing to give you some scientific background.
That's true.
But you can get the ideas going, and don't kill the creativity just because you don't know how to explain something. Just move on.
It's true.
And then the hardest part I've always found is starting something. The first sentence is horrifying to me. That's when I clam up. I have to not think about it being the first. I can't think this is the first sentence of a story. I have to just write, and then once I finish the piece, then I'll come with the first sentence.
Do you ever change it?
Yes, I change it every.
Going back work that you did years ago.
Yeah,
just
because the problem with if you write the first sentence, and this is the first sentence, because there's a lot of weight on that first sentence. You've got to make it engaging and capture the attention. So you go, this is how I want the first perception of this book to be, or the story to be seen, and then you go on. But you might find actually the story kind of goes in a different way. That is no longer relevant. You have to cut that and start again. And you might find that you rewrite the first sentence. But that's one of my. I've got a few stucks, a few sticking points. There's two other things I really struggle with. But first sentences give me chills.
I know what you mean. Actually, I've got a couple of pieces of work where if I read back over it, I think that's not a bad piece of work. I'm enjoying what I'm reading, but I included the word virgin in the first sentence. Like I have just weirded out my entire audience.
You try to set the scene, but you suddenly realise halfway through the piece that that's not the scene that I was saying.
Yeah. What you have to remember as well is that words change over time, and words that would have been appropriate 50, 100 years ago. So all of a sudden, I quite like the word gaiety, but
And going back to the literacy of your readership, the chances are most people will probably just snigger at the word and not understand what it means. And you've just killed the whole mood of the novel.
The integrity of your piece is decided by your audience, and if your audience are idiots, then you're in trouble.
But
we'd never call our audience idiots.
no, of course not. No. I think if you write, you got to write for your audience. What scares you? What's the scariest part for you when it comes to? What are the two things that you get stuck on?
Well, showing people. I often find that because I write very kind of descriptively about a single point, that my personality comes out very wholly about one single point before moving on to another. So I feel as if there's a lot of myself in my writing, which makes it quite scary to show people. Yeah, and obviously the whole kind of rejection off the back of that, someone just saying, I don't think this is written particularly well, or etc. It hurts quite a lot, which is what I find that there's usually about a couple of week review period for me. There's an acceptance that, well, there's a whole denial over a few days that there was ever anything wrong, and then obviously because I think about my writing as well quite a lot, that it ends up just kind of sneaking in. Oh, but what if that perfectly placed metaphor, as you thought, is actually
I've had to develop a bit of a hard skin, because obviously when you put out a blog post to the consumer masses or whatever, and you get a bit of blowback from that, and people are quite happy to fire on and criticize it, and and obviously you don't pour your heart and soul into a blog post, but there's still elements of you in everything you write. Once you've done something for a while, you kind of get into you've got your style, you've got your voice, you kind of fall back on that. I'm a bit of a cheeky chappy kind of thing going on, and when somebody goes, I don't get it, he's get on with it sort of thing, you go, oh, well, maybe I wasn't quite on message there. But then I think most times you're going to find people are willing and quite perceptive to reading something that someone's created. I think it goes back to the idea of this is me here, here's a little bit of my thoughts into your head, get on board with it. I think people also appreciate that kind of thing.
I think so. I mean, it's pretty much the entire reason I enjoy reading. I enjoy getting to know an author, and most of these classics that have survived the trial of time seem to be geniuses. Geniuses that without their writing would be lost. And I just feel like the best way I can get to know them is to read their work, and it's beautiful. I feel like I have lots of
snapshots, aren't there, of the time. That's the kind of
that too. But what I find is the psychology of people doesn't really seem to have changed over 400 years. Like, I mean, I only go as far back. I've read a few Plato, but really,
if you read like Chaucer, I mean, it's still risky. It's still full of innuendo.
Oh God, Shakespeare and innuendo.
Humor in its rawest form is still the same. Okay, I probably wouldn't get half the jokes that came out of the Shakespearean play, but
all about his dick. They are like all Shakespeare did.
It's like your mama jokes all the way through. It's like,
I wouldn't be surprised.
And I think that there isn't a highbrow element to Shakespeare. I think a lot of people get a little bit strung up on it because it's in Old English, but I think I prefer it as like a historical document than I do as a piece of literary brilliance. It is really well written, and it's a testament to the fact that it's still there. But I can't say that I've come away inspired by it. But there are elements of it that still stay with you, and I'll probably get a lot of hate for
hating on Shakespeare.
Old Shaky.
Right. Well, we'll finish up with what are you working on? Not just specifically. I don't mean details. I mean just kind of the style, the kind of what kind of themes kind of like are you into? Because we're both 26. Oh, actually, no, I'm 27 now. Yeah, we're both the same age, both similar upbringing. I'm just curious, like kind of like what kind of themes are your mind stuck on? What do you like writing about?
At the moment, I'm kind of I'm enjoying. I found that I have been taking pieces of people's personalities, and taking good bits and bad bits from everyone and putting them into one character, and sort of exploring that route. From there's someone I once knew at university. I'll take his kind of sort of carefree attitude, I guess, is probably the kindest way of putting it. Kind of just didn't care about things. A bit of a vagrant, I guess. Taking that and combining it with, maybe a slightly dystopian mindset and seeing where that goes. I'm really into the moment exploring like a short story. A lot of the things I've attempted have been, I've almost been overreaching and setting higher standards for myself. But I've recently come back round to the idea that a short story like this is, if you can get something across in 4 or 5 pages, then there's a bit of an art to that. And because I could write thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of words, and I don't know what that would show, but if you can condense that to hitting that point, don't bore us, get to the chorus, that kind of thing, just keeping it good. I mean, but pacing as well is something I've been trying to work on. Dialogue, those are my 2 fears when it comes to writing those kind of things, and so I've been working to try and improve pacing how it needs to be done, and how you need to move a story along, but without just chucking out things here, left, right, center, and trying to sort of slap people around the face every 5 minutes. You need to try and here's this thing, stew on this for a while, let's shift the story along. I think that's very key, and dialogue is just so hard for me.
I find dialogue quite hard to.
It's easiest if you write from what you know.
I've been trying to write it very old-fashioned. I don't know whether people 100 years ago really spoke as they did in Jane Austen, but it seems to me that they say exactly what they mean, and they use exactly the amount of words that it takes to say them. And if that is not okay with the reader or okay with the person, because I can't imagine talking to someone and then talking for about 2 minutes solidly and then waiting for them to talk for 2 minutes solidly. Maybe it happened back then. Maybe people just liked each other more.
and maybe that was just that way of getting this moving the story along through dialogue. I avoid dialogue. That's probably a shortcoming of mine. I avoid it unless I really have to. But you have to put it in there, otherwise you've got a silent movie. Or, it's kind of existential nightmares. So you have to have it. But if you get it wrong, then it completely kills the piece. You get too much of it, then it becomes a script.
Yeah.
If the idiolect isn't right, if you're throwing in weird accents and cutting,
I avoid that altogether.
I avoid accents because it only takes one person not to understand that that's a Scottish accent. So to not make any sense.
As I say, apart from colloquial. But then again, that's relative to where I am.
Therefore. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've got our own way of talking, and I'm sure anyone watching this will probably maybe struggle with the sort of Thames estuary accent that we've got.
I don't think we have it too greatly.
Well, I know, but you're in it. That's
people can pick it up if they're from elsewhere, but I often get told that they don't know I'm from Essex.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they can tell I'm not from round here.
You've worked hard to get really accent. But I think I couldn't write in the same way as someone from Scotland. I don't understand that way, and I wouldn't be able to do it convincingly. And so that, I don't know whether that narrows down your range of characters, or whether I should just, like I probably, as I was saying earlier, bite the bullet and just to hell with it. I'm gonna see where this goes, and my whole thing is the thing I've been saying is be carefree until you have it all written up and you can edit it back down. That's kind of if there's anything to take away from this, even if you're writing an essay for school, or even if you have to write a speech, a best man speech or anything, just get it down on paper, get everything down, explore every possible route. Then you can go back and cut things. Don't get too caught up on producing a novel in the first draft, because that's when you get stuck.
Cool. Well, I think that we've got some good advice here, and I hope that anybody who is or will watch this video enjoys some of the tips and tricks, and perhaps you're at the same kind of point, either step 1 on the ladder like me, or step pro 2. Like Joe.
1.5.
Well, I see you up there, so it's above me. Right, been a pleasure, Joe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.